So Galway beat Limerick in quite convincingly for a finish, 26 points to 117 at Pearse Stadium. Evan Nyland with 14 points, and it's a game with plenty of interesting subplots. Whether it's Joe Canning coming on at midfield and having a really good impact. He did a great solo run at one stage to set up a point, and over the shoulder point from distance from Cathal Mannion. So both players did superbly for that particular moment, and that allowed Galway to get 22 points to 115 ahead with 11 minutes to go, and from then on they pushed out. I mean, the fourth quarter of the game, they won it by 12 points, 7 points to 3. And they looked like they were going to continue pulling away. Limerick, a couple of players stood out. Doc Road Hegarty was quite good, obviously plays on the line, but I don't mean that in an overly negative sense. He's a really good player, and he's crucial to anything Limerick did positive that allowed them to cut up through the centre and put Galway on the back foot. So the interesting thing for Joe Canning is, like, last year he finished the season and he ends up with an injury, concussion against, I think it was a concussion anyway, it was a head injury certainly, suffered against Galway or Limerick, and we wondered how he'd come back for this year, but he looked like he hit the ground running, bringing him into midfield, and you wonder, is there going to be a new role for the year for that Shane O'Neill is going to give him? A bit like, I'm thinking Wayne Rooney with Man United, towards the latter end of his career he goes midfield, so maybe this will be more successful for Canning. His use to the ball, you would imagine if he gets on the front foot a lot, his use of the ball is going to be very, very good. It was interesting that Evan Nyland stayed on the frees even when Canning came on the field. Now, Canning did hit one from his own half, an absolute bomb, with 8 minutes remaining to put them 23 points to 115 ahead. But Nyland stayed on him for the most part. Galway certainly created more chances, 36 to 31. Didn't really get in for goal scoring chances, whereas Limerick might have had another one. I thought Seamus Flanagan was very good leading the line. Wins an awful lot of ball he shouldn't. Wins an awful lot of turnovers. I think in the first half, John Kiley's trying out a player or two. Didn't always go Cathal O'Neill's way, but you can see that he's a really good player, and there's going to be plenty more to come from him. Keane Lynch, I wonder sometimes, is his being moved from midfield to half forward and in and out of the team for certain league games. And you can understand why John Kiley is doing that. But he was very, very quiet in this game, and he's one of the best hurlers in the country, so it's unusual to see him so quiet. So you just wonder, will they settle on a position with him or continue to move him around? Maybe he'll come back into form either way, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that. One thing that stood out to me is there was always the thing that Kilkenny, especially when they were playing tip in big games, from the throw-in, they'd win the ball and be soloing straight up the middle and end up getting a score at the start of both halves. Pretty much, it felt like every game when I was watching it was just like it was Groundhog Day, and that's something that Limerick did at the start of both halves, and got scores from both situations. The first half, Brian O'Grady, he won a free from Pádraig Mannion that was knocked over by Reedy. Started the second half. Darragh Donovan ended up with the ball, flicked it on to Hegarty, and he knocked it over the bar. It wasn't just Joe Canning that had a big impact when he came into the game. Aaron Gillane certainly did too. And like, it just as much as I've said that Seamus Flanagan was really good, and he was, when the ball went into Aaron Gillane, he just looked like such a danger. Those quick feet, it's going to upset any defender, and what an outlet he is, because you can knock the ball into him any which way at all. So the water breaks, well, obviously there's a huge amount of frees, so that's frustrating to watch, and the referees are basically following the guidelines that they've been given, and a lot of it is even for over carrying the ball and fouling, technical fouls. And some of that I think is fair enough, and some of it is probably a little bit too much. But there was a huge amount of frees in this game again, and an awful lot of the talk is about David Reedy, Evan Nyland, and the other couple of frees that were hit over by Diarmaid Burns and Joe Canning and that. So that's a little bit frustrating to watch. So are the water breaks. Again, love to get your comments in on this. But when I see it's supposed to be a break for the players to get water on board. That's the whole point. Obviously, we don't have Mayor Ishkas running in anymore, passing bottles around, COVID and all that sort of regulation. But to see tactics boards coming in during these breaks, and look at it. Obviously, everyone's out to win their match. And if you're on that team, you're happy to get the instruction and the tactics board. But if you're watching, it can be frustrating at times. It might be unfair to say it. You're like, look at this ego trip happening with lads at tactics board and sideline. Now, it's definitely unfair, and I'm certainly not picking anyone out in particular, but it sort of sums up my level of frustration when I watch it. Because there's enough things interrupting the games with frees, with stuff like that, and no atmosphere because there's no crowds at the moment. But this thing holding the game up for a minute, and then because it's tactic talks, you're going to end up having tweaks happening, which is going to make probably defences more settled and stuff like that. So that's a bit frustrating to watch. But just let me know what you think of the game. Galway, 2 wins in a row and looking good.